Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and my guest this week is Jodie, who grew up eating pretty healthily, but because of her own health issues later on in life, including being diagnosed as celiac, she started studying nutrition and realized that sugar, especially fructose, has way more effect on the body than she ever knew about. And that's what she's sharing on this week's episode. We'll get to my chat with Jodie in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. And while you're at aftersugarclub.com, why not take the cravings quiz? I created this cravings quiz specifically to help you start thinking more deeply about what triggers your cravings. And when you do this quiz, you'll get your personalized score as well as my practical tips to help you take your first step to get rid of cravings. Those free resources are at aftersugarclub.com. And also, come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at MyLifeAfterSugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. So I'm here with Jodie today. And Jodie, can you tell us a little bit about your background with food and sugar when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. So, growing up in the 70s, I don't feel like we had a lot of issues with sugar or food. My mom cooked at home all the time. We always had home cooked meals, and if we had dessert, I do remember having some Oreos once in a while, and if the milk truck would drop off some ice cream. But back then, those ingredients were always so minimal. So I don't feel like we ever talked about it or had any issues with sugar or food. And the way my mom cooked, a lot of times she cooked her own bread. We didn't eat cereal very often, but sometimes we'd have cereal, but those were back when the ingredients were pretty decent. So growing up, I don't feel like I had any issues with food, or we didn't talk about it. But, as I started having kids and thinking about sawing the ingredients change, and I really started being interested in food and nutrition when I had to feed my own kids. And so I really started paying attention to the ingredients and all the colors and things that were being put in food. And it was nice because I have 4 kids, but by the time I got to my 4th one, he was really sensitive. And there was a lot of things we couldn't figure out what was going on with his sensitivities. And it took a long time to figure out that food dyes were just making his behavior go off the charts. And really, we started changing his diet and seeing a big difference. And even things like citric acid was an issue for him. And so he was on a minimal diet, but he was small, so he didn't care. And then years go by, and all of a sudden I started getting kind of sick, and I couldn't figure out what was going on with me. And I was already in a place where I did a lot of my own research, and I did things to help myself. I mean, I didn't want to go to the doctor, but even when I did, they didn't seem to be super helpful. And turns out that I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So I had a lot of nutritional deficiencies. At the time, I was eating vegetarian, and so I had to change a lot of things when I got diagnosed with celiac. And I was also doing a lot of overtraining with marathons and triathlons and some things like that. So my body was just broken down so much. So I changed my diet, my family's diet. I started eating meat again, and eventually I got healthy. And then we're still working on my son and some of his triggers, and eventually we realized that he had a neurological condition called PANDAS and autoimmune encephalitis. And he also has the MTHFR mutation. So that's when we realized he didn't methylate, he didn't detox very well. And that kind of brought me to the liver. And we had to do a lot of supporting the liver
All
for
right, hang
him.
on. I'm just going to stop you there because you just said a lot of stuff that is pretty technical. Start.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just interrupt you for a second, but starting from when you found out you were celiac, can we just backtrack to that and then we'll get into the other
Oh,
jargon?
yeah, sure.
What can you explain what being celiac actually means?
So celiac disease is a genetic disease, and usually it's a kind of an epigenetic thing. So it's just one of those things where it's, at some point in your life, the light switch may or may not be turned on for that disease. And I believe that it was because I was training so much. I owned a business and I was working a lot. So my body got really stressed, and pretty soon the light was, or the switch was just flipped, and I started getting sick. And of course, I'm running marathons, and I owned a juice bar and gluten-free cafe at the time, and I didn't even know it needed to be gluten-free. I just knew that gluten bothered me, and so I was like, well, I'm just gonna just not have any gluten in my restaurant. So I was working a lot, and I'd go to church on Sunday mornings and I'd sleep. I would sleep in church. I couldn't figure out why I was so tired and why I couldn't run anymore. And when I did go running, my body, it took me 2 or 3 days to recover just from a run, even a short run. And so I just had to kind of stop everything and really evaluate what was happening. And I went to the doctors, and my thyroid had kind of gotten out of control, my Hashimoto's, and they were increasing my doses. And I was just like, let's just full stop right now. Let's figure out what's going on. And I did the research, and I had to tell the doctor that I believe I have celiac. And she kind of laughed at me, and it was kind of frustrating. And she's like, no, you need to eat less and exercise more. And I was like, you clearly don't understand my life. That's all I do is eat
Yeah.
less and exercise more, and that's not working. And they did the test, and sure enough, it was celiac, which surprised them. But
Yeah, it's surprising that the patient would tell the doctor,
yeah.
right, rather than the
Yeah.
other way around. And although she was gracious enough to get you tested for celiac, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And I was 40 years old at the time. And she said, well, we don't, this is really uncommon for people your age. And I was like, it doesn't matter how uncommon it is. There's got to be someone in that 1% of the population. And I don't hope that it's me, but I just think it's me. So let's just test and
Yeah,
see.
good.
And
And
yeah.
you're in the States, so you can push for that. It's not like that everywhere, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
mhm.
So whereabouts are you in the States?
I am in Idaho, in southern Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got tested, it came back positive for celiac, and you were saying that you were eating vegetarian. What is the connection between celiac and vegetarian?
Well, I just had a lot of nutrient deficiencies. So, and vegetarian, if you're not doing it right, which I think that I was doing a lot of things right. I had some, vegan protein powders. I was getting, I was trying really hard to make sure I was getting complete proteins in and things like that. But it can, if it's not for your body type, it can be really stressful on your body. And so I ended up, once I was diagnosed with celiac, I started off with drinking bone broth because I needed to heal my gut. It was it was a mess. And I needed to get some extra nutrients in. So then I focused on the bone broth and really high nutrient vegetables. And then, of course, I couldn't have any flour. So I didn't really eat a lot of grains in general. But eating some meat was what ultimately got me back on my feet, I think.
Yeah, that kind of goes against what the sort of the current trend is, right?
Yeah, exactly. It
Mm.
is.
Yeah, which goes to show it's probably better to listen to your own body than to follow any trends out there.
Right. And it's not a one size all fits all out there. And when the doctor just tries to treat you like a textbook, it's really important that you push back if it doesn't feel right. That gut feeling is there for a reason. I mean, your gut is truly like telling your body, and you have that feeling that, wait a minute, yeah, I gotta do something different than what he's telling me, even if he is a doctor.
Right. Oh, yeah, and total respect for doctors, that's
Yes.
yeah. Um, so um, so I mean, what has this got to do with sugar? Because sugar is like, a vegan, vegetarian ingredient.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, sugar, just especially when you're talking about like the bleached white sugar, that's just so highly processed, and all it does is just go straight to glucose and turn into fat. I mean, I was doing a lot of exercising at the time, so I mean, I was probably considered maybe a skinny fat. I mean, I don't really like that term, but it is a term.
What does
And
that mean, though?
um,
That sounds like an oxymoron to me.
it totally does. But it just means that you can be thin and you can eat sugar. But just because you can eat sugar and be thin doesn't mean that you're healthy on the inside. It's like feeding your car the wrong octane of gas. It's not going to run right. And so you gotta put what's right. And then, I thought I was doing the right thing. I went to agave and things like that, but those are just sugars too. And especially agave, I wouldn't even, it might be one step above white sugar, but it's still fructose. So I would, yeah. And so it took me a long time to learn what kind of sugars that I could eat without it really messing with me metabolically.
And what are those types of sugars then that you can eat?
There's right now I don't really eat any sugars at all. And if I do, I don't make myself feel guilty about it because, it's not the end all be all if you have some sugar, but honey is really a good sugar to eat. It also, I mean, is healing. So in my healing process, I had some honey. Um, uh, what I don't know. Brown sugar is just sugar with molasses in it, but coconut sugar, I do if I feel like making some dessert, I'll use some coconut sugar or maple sugar. I just make sure they're good quality and don't have anything else in them.
Okay.
There's a lot of sugar substitutes, but I don't ever eat sugar substitutes. Those are especially the aspartame and sweetened lows and
Artificial.
things like that. Yeah.
Mhm. And so on a molecular level, is there any difference or real, difference between, let's say, agave and sugar or honey and sugar or any sort of alternatives that are natural?
Uh, yeah, the honeys are they have some nutrients in them, so they're not going to affect your blood sugar as much as like agave would, because agave or white sugar is just processed sugar, and so any nutrients that excuse me might have been in any of those are just taken out, and a lot of times they're filled with some chemicals that make them white or make them as like as liquid as agave. So you've got the chemicals that go along with that.
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews. And when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar. Okay, all right. So you're interested in, or an expert on, the liver. And can you just, I read, although I could be wrong, right? Because I'm not an expert, but I read that the liver is the only organ in the body that can metabolize fructose, the fructose molecule. Is that accurate?
So yeah, well, fructose is it's found in like the high fructose corn syrup that we're familiar with. It's found in so many processed foods, but fructose is not glucose. So glucose is what your body can use for energy, but fructose has to be processed in the liver, almost solely in the liver. And so when you eat a lot of fructose from, sodas and fruit juice, just pure fruit juices, which are all sugar, things like cereal, that all has to get processed in the liver. And so when you're eating too much of that, which is a lot of the standard diet, it's going to put too much strain on the liver and it'll get overloaded.
Okay, so is there a difference between the fructose that's found in fruit and, let's say, the fructose that's found in high fructose corn syrup or sugar, white sugar, I mean?
There's a difference. So the fructose in fruit, a lot of times when you're eating the fruit, especially the whole fruit, you're going to get fiber. So you're going to get a different, you're going to absorb that a lot differently than the high fructose corn syrup. And the high fructose corn syrup, again, is just so processed, and with the chemicals, they're going to be metabolized very differently. And you can, especially if you have a lot of strain already on your liver, you don't want to eat a lot of fruit because that's still going to be metabolized in the liver. But fruit, especially with fiber, is going to be metabolized and absorbed a lot differently.
And what does the fiber do? Like, what is the difference?
So the fiber can slow down the digestion process, and then the fructose in fruit is it doesn't have that high glycemic index like the high fructose corn syrup. So it's just a whole different kind of sugar. And some of that sugar is actually really good for you because you want glucose for energy, and you'll get the glucose from and the fructose kind of turns into energy from the fruit, if that makes sense.
Okay, so like a lot of people, when I say I'm sugar-free, ask me, but do you still eat fruit? Which I do, but not much because I don't really like sweet tastes anymore, not even from fruit, but I do sometimes. But do I understand right that the molecules, because glucose and fructose are molecules, right?
Yeah.
And so on a molecular level, is the actual fructose molecule different in fruit than it is in, say, white sugar or high fructose corn syrup?
Well, in my training, it is different. It's different because it comes from nature, and even though it's sugar, and you want to probably, if you're eating fruit, you probably want to eat lower sugar or fructose containing fruits. That's usually what I tell my clients is just eat the lower sugar fruits, because again, sugar is sugar, and your body will treat it as sugar, but you also have, when it's processed, it'll also just, land differently in your body where it can cause things like fatty liver disease or something like that, or weight gain. But the fruit, like in berries, blueberries are like nature's perfect fruit. Blueberries are the best thing to eat if you're going to eat fruit, but raspberries and strawberries, anything, blackberries, anything that's a berry are low in sugar, and then they have the fiber in them to help with digestion and
Okay.
yeah.
So if I understand right, it's not so much that the molecule is different per se, but that the way that the body handles the fructose molecule is different if you have, say, the fiber in fruit rather than
Mhm.
the white sugar. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. That's
Okay.
how I.
Okay. So let's say you are eating too much sugar, and that's a separate conversation about what too much actually means. What can you walk us through how that excess fructose goes, like how it affects the liver?
So when you're eating excess fructose, and that could be like we've talked about in the process of just sugar, fruit, processed foods, what it does is the liver becomes overburdened with trying to process that, and it starts accumulating in the liver, and then it takes over the functional cells, and it turns it just turns it into fat because it can't process all of it. So now all of a sudden, fat starts taking over, and then the fat cells don't do, can't have no purpose and have no working mechanism in the liver. So this liver cells just are the ones that regulate blood sugar, and they make bile, and they metabolize nutrients. So now all of a sudden, when your liver's overburdened with sugar and processed foods, the liver just can't. It just stops. It starts functioning on a lesser level over time.
Okay. And is that what could potentially lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what happens, and a lot of times, it's called the silent epidemic, and so people, who are eating these standard diets of processed foods and just running through the drive-through, people aren't realizing that their liver is accumulating fat from being overburdened, and now we have all of a sudden a silent epidemic, and unfortunately the way people are eating now, it's happening in kids as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, is this what you were referring to when you're saying skinny fat, or it's visceral
Mhm.
fat, right?
Right, yeah. Because I mean, typically you're gonna have like a higher or a larger waist circumference if you're getting fatty liver, and that's you've got the visceral fat, but you're gonna get a larger waist, you're gonna start gaining weight, but it not all the time. Like if your body's metabolizing the sugar, but it's metabolizing through the liver, yeah, you can definitely be thin and still have fatty liver.
Yeah, I mean, I've read that visceral fat, fat around the organs, is way more
Yeah.
dangerous than subcutaneous fat under the skin that you
Yes.
can actually see you're overweight.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why they are get really concerned with the waist circumference, because that is where the fat starts accumulating, is around all the organs.
Okay, and so what does non-alcoholic fatty liver disease look like for the person who has it? Are there symptoms?
Yeah. So there are symptoms. I mean, there because it's a silent epidemic, you're gonna not see them like you would hope that you would see them with something so terrible happening inside your body, but you're gonna start feeling fatigue. You'll start uh, getting brain fog. Those are kind of those are two of the main things that really start happening, is just getting the fatigue. You might actually start getting some pain around the abdomen, like on your right side where your liver is. You could feel some uncomfortableness, especially after you eat certain things. But otherwise, it if you feel like you've had a diet that hasn't been optimal, it's probably best to learn about prevention and going in and just having your liver enzymes checked, making sure you don't have metabolic dysfunction, just having your CBC done. Those types of things are going to give you some indication of what's going on inside.
Can you tell us what that acronym means?
The
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 CPC,
CBC, that's
CBC.
a complete blood count.
Okay.
And then, yeah, that's going to tell you where a lot of um, well, just where your blood is, but you'll also want like a liver kidney test. Those are going to tell you where your enzymes are. But if you've got insulin resistance or you're on your way to diabetes, those types of things, your cholesterol, those are all going to make a difference in uh, whether or not you're on the road to fatty liver disease.
Okay, because we tend to think that anything to do with the liver or liver disease is down to too much alcohol.
Yeah, yeah,
But here
and
we are
that's
saying it's non-alcoholic.
Yeah. Obviously the alcohol is where it kind of started, but then we just started seeing that the overload of sugar and the overload of the processed foods, or I mean, even eating too much fat, and not the right kinds of fats it can deposit in the liver. The older you get, there's just a lot of things that can contribute. Even menopause can contribute to that your liver being not as functional because your hormones get processed through the liver. So your gut health, all of that plays a role. And they're actually starting, I can't remember the letters, but they're changing the name of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease to it's NAFLD to a metabolic, rather than just calling it non-alcoholic, because it's basically metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah.
So that's where they're going with that.
Okay. So what can the layperson do, the consumer, the citizen do to look after their liver, apart from not drink and what, I guess not eat sugar?
Yeah, definitely don't eat a lot of sugar, but in the other forms that we talked about, like berries, are just very moderate. But one of the most important things that you want to do is just keep your blood sugar regulated, which is obviously reducing sugar, especially in fructose. You just want to eat more whole, real foods, because when you're doing that, then you're not getting the processed food with all the lists of ingredients that your body doesn't support anyway. Yeah, like we said, you want to eat more fiber, and vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables are really, really good for your liver. Things like broccoli and beets, and you can drink dandelion tea. That's going to help support your liver and help move toxins. Because even toxins get metabolized through your liver. So there's a lot at play, but not to get, especially if you're just starting to think about it, you don't want to get overwhelmed with all the things, but you just want to make a few lifestyle changes that whatever you put into your body is pretty much going to go through the liver. That's the major organ in our body, maybe besides our brain, but and it is regenerative. I mean, the good news is the liver is regenerative. So, I mean, you can have been eating a lot of fast food, and because your job, you're busy or whatever, and then you can stop and say, oh, you know what, I'm gonna cook more at home and I'm going to eat more whole foods. And your liver, it might take some time, but it's going to regenerate itself. That's the beautiful thing about your liver too.
Yeah, fantastic. Because I mean, for sugar, we tend to concentrate on the pancreas for the glucose molecule, but I don't hear much talked about the liver for the fructose molecule. And I'm curious
Mhm.
to know, do studies show the sort of cutoff level of how much fructose is too much fructose for the liver to handle?
I don't know if there's like a cutoff. It's pretty much just moderation, and you've got to really pay attention to what your body tells you too. So if went to a birthday party and you had a big old piece of cake and some ice cream, and you just go home and you're like, oh, I'm full and bloated, then you're gonna say, oh, maybe I should have just cut back on my portion a little bit, or but though I don't know if there's really a cutoff, because everybody's going to be different, how they feel. But what I do with my clients is I just always ask them, how do you feel after you ate that? I mean, you can have the blood glucose monitors, you can have them, the ones on your arms, you can check things like that. But if you really just want to keep it simple, just how do you feel after you eat something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the people that I help as well, it's like it's not just a question of data, of the blood sugar level or even how they feel. It's a question of behavior as well, where
Mhm.
asking them to cut back on the portion of cake is just not realistic. People like me and people I help, we once we have a bit of cake, we will have a lot more.
Yeah. Well, it does taste good, so.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's not even about the taste, it just triggers that type of behavior, which is
Oh
part of
yeah.
why I don't eat any of that stuff anymore, because I don't want that behavior to be part of
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I work with my clients a lot on behavior change. And because that is a real thing, like it, and that's why it's important to have a little bit and to try to work over time with the behavior because it is hard to change that. And the dopamine that the hit that you get when you're eating something like that or drinking a soda, that those dopamine receptors are real in your brain. But just over time, I work with clients on behavior change and for me, I've I work on that 2 bite rule. Like my brother's birthday party was a few days ago, and my mom bought a gluten-free cake, which I didn't really want her to, but I took 2 bites of it. They were kind of big. I was like, I'm only gonna have 2 bites. But in my brain, I've taught myself to say, I'm gonna have 2 bites. And for me, I even tell myself while I'm eating those 2 bites, oh, this is really good. This is so good. I'm glad I get to eat these 2 bites. And then the pleasure part of my brain feels satisfied
Yeah.
because I've taught myself to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I sort of simplistically use two groups of people, moderators, which it sounds like you are, and abstainers, people like me, for whom what you just described it just doesn't apply. It's just,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can't.
yeah.
And so we're
It's
better off just taking away the triggers altogether. And
yeah,
that's how
yeah.
we feel more peaceful.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people that works for, and then you just find new things that like I could eat some macadamia nuts and feel so happy because they're soft and buttery and they just have a really good flavor and crunch. So then I don't feel like reaching for the chips with all the seed oils in them.
Yeah.
So there are some things that you can start replacing the not so good things with too.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating to know just how important the liver is in the metabolism of sugar, especially fructose, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I remember before I stopped sugar, I had elevated liver enzymes, ALT, for example, and I
yeah.
didn't even know what that was. And it all went back to normal when I cut sugar. But it's like
Hmm.
I felt that before I got into this whole sugar, rabbit hole, I
Yeah.
hardly knew anything about fructose or about the liver at all. I don't remember really even learning about it at school.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the liver is just kind of forgotten in there. We're always figuring out how we can support our brain and with healthy fats, to avoid neurological diseases. But the liver just kind of sits there and takes a beating and we just forget about it. And it's actually the one organ that we probably should think more about because it's the one that digests and it's the one that processes everything that goes in our body, everything that we breathe, the water that we drink. If our water isn't clean, our liver has to process all of that.
Yeah. Hard-working organ.
Very,
Yeah.
very.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jodie. This has been fascinating and hopefully educational for listeners out there. And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So I have Instagram where I'm the most active on. That's Jodie G Wellness. It's JODIE G Wellness. That's where I'm at on Instagram. I probably the most active there.
Okay, I'll put that
Yeah.
link along with this episode. And thank you so much, Jodie.
Oh, thanks, Netta. It's been fun.
I love this conversation with Jodie because we hear a lot about glucose, but not that much about fructose. And white sugar, as well as most other forms of sugar, contain two molecules, one of glucose and the other of fructose. And as we were saying in this podcast episode, the liver is the only organ that can metabolize fructose. And even though the molecule itself isn't a problem, as with most things, too much is, well, too much. And an overload of fructose can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So just like Jodie, one of the best things for your liver, as well as your general health, is to cut sugar. But of course that sounds all well and good in theory, but it gets a lot trickier in practice. And that's exactly why I created the Freedom from Cravings Formula program. In the program, you'll get step-by-step guidance and customized support through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident in your food choices so that you can ditch the shame and embarrassment that you feel every time your emotions make you slip or fall off the wagon, and so that you never feel like you're on some kind of a restrictive diet. If you're at the stage of your life where you're finally ready to look after yourself, let's chat. You can hop on a free clarity call with me at any time by going to aftersugarclub.com and clicking on Program at the top. You'll also find the link with the show notes together with this episode. So go to aftersugarclub.com. Speak soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.